It was just another mundane Monday morning. I sat at my desk, staring at the computer screen, my fingers idly tapping against the keyboard. My eyes kept wandering to the bank statement lying next to me, a nagging feeling tugging at the back of my mind. Something wasn't right. I picked up the statement, scanning the list of transactions once again. A frown creased my forehead as I spotted the discrepancy, a recurring charge for an unfamiliar vendor amounting to a sizable sum each month. It didn't align with any of our typical expenses. "Nolan?" I called out to my husband, who was in the adjacent room. He poked his head through the doorway, his brows raised in question. "What's up, Bree?" I held up the bank statement, my eyes narrowing. "Do you know anything about these charges? They've been happening for a while now, and I can't figure out what they're for." Nolan glanced at the statement, his expression unreadable. He shrugged nonchalantly. "Must have slipped your mind. It's probably some subscription or something." I pursed my lips, unconvinced. "But for this much and for so long, I don't remember signing up for anything like this." He crossed the room, planting a kiss on my forehead. "You know how forgetful you can be sometimes," he said with a chuckle. "Don't worry about it. I'll look into it." His dismissive attitude only fueled my suspicion. I watched as he turned and left the room, a sinking feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. Throughout the day, my mind kept drifting back to the mysterious charges. Nolan's cavalier response did little to assuage my concerns. If anything, it made me more determined to uncover the truth. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I broached the subject again. "So, did you ever figure out what those charges were for?" Nolan paused mid-bite, his eyes flickering briefly before settling on mine. "Nope, haven't had a chance yet, but I'm sure it's nothing to worry about." His lack of urgency only served to heighten my unease. "Nolan, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. How can you be so blasé about it?" He let out an exasperated sigh. "Brielle, I promise I'll look into it. But you need to trust me on this." Trust. The word hung heavy in the air, its weight pressing down on me. I wanted to trust him. I loved him, after all. But something deep within me refused to let go of the nagging doubt. As the days passed, the mysterious charges continued to appear, and Nolan's promises to investigate remained unfulfilled. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and with each passing day, it took root, growing stronger and more insidious. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter where the truth might lead. The days blurred together, each one more strained than the last. Nolan's late nights at the office became more frequent, his excuses growing flimsier with each passing week. The distance between us seemed to widen with every lie that slipped from his lips. "Another late meeting," he muttered one evening as he rushed out the door, his tie askew and his briefcase haphazardly stuffed with papers. I didn't bother responding. What was the point? Theo, our 8-year-old son, watched his father's departure with a puzzled frown. "Mom, why is Dad always working so late?" I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "He's just been really busy lately, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." But Theo's innocent question stirred something within me. The seeds of doubt that had taken root were now sprouting, their tendrils wrapping around my heart and constricting tighter with each passing day. A few evenings later, as I was tucking Theo into bed, he piped up again. "Mom, who's Cora?" I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "What did you say?" "Cora," he repeated, his brow furrowed. "Dad keeps talking about her at work." A cold chill ran down my spine. Pushing down the rising panic, I managed a strained smile. "I'm sure it's just someone from the office, honey. Nothing to worry about." But as I left Theo's room, my mind was racing. Who was this Cora? And why was Nolan constantly mentioning her name? The next day, I confided in my best friend Elise over coffee. "Am I being paranoid here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Or is there something going on that I'm missing?" Elise's expression softened with concern. "Bree, you know I love Nolan, but his behavior lately has been sketchy, to say the least. Those late nights, the unexplained charges, it's not looking good." I swallowed hard, my grip tightening around my mug. "And now this Cora woman? What am I supposed to think?" Elise reached across the table, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "Look, I hate to say this, but I've heard rumors around the office about Nolan being seen with another woman." The air seemed to be sucked from my lungs. "You're kidding." She shook her head solemnly. "I wish I were. It could be nothing, but..." Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The late nights, the mysterious charges, the unknown woman's name. A sickening realization washed over me. Could Nolan really be having an affair? A few weeks later, I found myself at a company event hosted by Nolan's firm. I had been dreading the evening, but I knew it was crucial to put on a brave face, at least for the time being. As I mingled with colleagues and their spouses, my eyes constantly scanned the room, searching for any sign of the mysterious Cora. Part of me hoped she was just a figment of my imagination, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But deep down I knew the truth was far more sinister. And then, as if summoned by my very thoughts, she appeared. A stunning woman in a form-fitting red dress, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in perfect waves. She moved through the crowd with an air of confidence, turning heads wherever she went. My heart sank as I watched her approach a group of Nolan's coworkers, exchanging friendly banter and laughing at their jokes. This was her, Cora, the woman who had been occupying so much of my husband's time and thoughts. As if sensing my gaze, she turned and caught my eye. For a moment her expression faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, replaced by a casual smile. She sauntered over to me, her hips swaying with each step. "Hi there," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Cora. You must be one of the wives." I forced a tight-lipped smile, grasping her hand briefly. "Brielle. Nice to meet you." Her eyes widened ever so slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Lovely to meet you too, Brielle. I've heard so much about you." The lie dripped from her lips like honey, sickly sweet and utterly false. Anger bubbled within me, but I kept my composure, nodding politely. "So, Cora," I said, my voice carefully measured, "how do you know my husband?" She laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, we've been working on a project together for a while now. Nolan's just the best, always staying late to make sure everything's perfect." My stomach churned at the implication behind her words. So, this was the reason for all those late nights, all those flimsy excuses. Nolan had been spending his time with this woman, this Cora, right under my nose. "That's wonderful," I managed, fighting to keep the sarcasm from seeping into my tone. "He's so dedicated to his work." Cora nodded eagerly, oblivious to the venom laced in my words. "Absolutely. He's been such a great partner to work with." She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. "Between you and me, he's mentioned a few times how his wife doesn't really understand the demands of his job." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. The audacity of this woman standing before me and essentially admitting to her role in my husband's betrayal was almost too much to bear, but I forced myself to remain calm, to play along. For now. I would have my revenge, but it would be calculated, precise. Nolan and his mistress would reap what they had sown, and the consequences would be devastating. The days following the company event were a blur of pain and anger. I could barely look at Nolan without feeling a surge of white-hot rage coursing through my veins. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. I knew I needed to confront him, to finally bring this sordid affair into the light. But I also knew I couldn't do it blindly. I needed proof, evidence to back up my accusations. That's when I reached out to a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a friend. Within days, he had compiled a dossier of damning information. Photographs of Nolan and Cora together, receipts for lavish dinners and hotel stays, even records of suspicious financial transactions. Armed with this arsenal of evidence, I summoned Nolan home early one evening, my hands trembling as I laid out the incriminating materials on the kitchen table. When he walked through the door, his brow furrowed at the sight before him. "Bree, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You know exactly what's going on, Nolan. Or should I say, you and Cora know what's going on." His face paled, his eyes flickering towards the damning evidence. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence," I snapped, my voice rising. "I have proof of your affair. The late nights, the unexplained expenses, the cozy dinners and hotel trysts. It's all right here." Nolan's shoulders slumped, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "Brielle, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. You're sorry? That's all you have to say after betraying me, after lying to me for who knows how long? He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. It's not that simple. We grew apart, Bree. You were always so focused on your work and I felt neglected. Cora, she made me feel appreciated again. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. So what? That justifies cheating on me. Lying to me, to our son? Nolan's gaze dropped, shame etched across his features. No, of course not. I know I've made a terrible mistake, but I want to make things right, Bree. I still love you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and grating. Love me? You have a twisted way of showing it, Nolan. As I stared at the man before me, the one I had once trusted implicitly, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. This was not the end, not by a long shot. Nolan would pay for his betrayal, for the pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me and our family. And I would be the one to make him suffer the consequences of his actions. In the days following my confrontation with Nolan, a cold determination settled over me. I would not be the scorned wife, meekly accepting his betrayal and moving on. No, Nolan would face the full consequences of his actions, and I would be the one to ensure it happened. My first step was to consult with a lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit, recommended by a friend who had gone through an ugly divorce herself. As I laid out the evidence of Nolan's affair and financial misdeeds, her eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger. We're going to bleed him dry, she assured me, a savage grin spreading across her face. He won't know what hit him. With her guidance, I began meticulously documenting every transaction, every shred of proof that could be used against Nolan. Late nights were spent poring over bank statements and credit card bills, tracking the money he had funneled away to support his dalliances with Cora. Nolan, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued with his routine, working late, spinning his lies, and no doubt reassuring his mistress that everything would be fine. Little did he know, the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. In the meantime, I took steps to protect myself and Theo. Quietly, I began siphoning funds into a separate account, squirreling away a nest egg for when the inevitable fallout occurred. I knew Nolan would try to retaliate, to punish me for exposing his deceit, but I would be ready. Elise, my ever-loyal friend, was a constant source of support during this time. Over coffee and tear-stained tissues, she listened as I poured out my rage and anguish, offering a steady shoulder to lean on. You're doing the right thing, Bree, she assured me, her eyes fierce with determination. That bastard deserves everything that's coming to him. With each passing day, my resolve only grew stronger. I was a woman possessed, driven by a burning desire for justice and retribution. Nolan had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and he would pay dearly for that transgression. The final piece fell into place when I secured copies of Nolan's employment contract and company policy documents. Hidden amongst the legalese was a clause explicitly prohibiting misuse of company resources for personal gain, a violation that could result in termination. A slow, savage smile spread across my face as I realized the devastating implications. Not only would Nolan face the consequences of his actions in our personal lives, but his professional world was about to come crashing down as well. With the evidence compiled and my ducks in a row, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Nolan had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. The only question remaining was how far I would go to ensure his rightful punishment was carried out. And the answer? As far as it took. It was the annual Newland family gathering, an event Nolan and I used to look forward to each year. A chance to reconnect with relatives, share stories, and bask in the warmth of familial love. This year, however, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension. Nolan kept shooting furtive glances in my direction, no doubt sensing the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. As the evening progressed, I bided my time, making small talk and laughing at the appropriate moments. All the while, I could feel the weight of the evidence burning in my purse, a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate. Finally, as dessert was being served, I couldn't contain it any longer. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and cleared my throat loudly. If I could have everyone's attention, please, I announced, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Conversation died down, and all eyes turned towards me, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched on their faces. I have something I need to share with all of you. I continued, tugging the manila envelope from my purse. Something that concerns my husband, Nolan. Nolan's face drained of color, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. Brielle, what are you doing? He hissed. I ignored him, pulling out the stack of photographs and spreading them across the table. These are just a few examples of the evidence I've gathered, proving that Nolan has been engaged in a long-term affair with another woman. Gasps rippled through the room, and I heard my mother-in-law let out a strangled cry. Nolan's siblings leaned in, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. It gets worse, I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. Not only has Nolan been unfaithful, but he's also been siphoning money from our joint accounts to fund his escapades with this woman. I produced the bank statements and receipts, laying them out alongside the damning photographs. Brielle, please, Nolan pleaded, his face ashen. This isn't the place. No, this is exactly the place, I snapped, rounding on him. You made your choices, Nolan. Choices that betrayed our vows, our family. Now it's time for you to face the consequences in front of everyone who knows us. Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the occasional sniffle or muffled sob. Nolan's head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But I wasn't done yet. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out the final document, the copy of Nolan's employment contract. According to this, your actions constitute a gross misuse of company resources, which is grounds for immediate termination. Nolan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with horror. No, you can't. I can, and I will, I said, my voice laced with steel. You've left me no choice, Nolan. You brought this upon yourself. With that, I gathered my belongings and made my way towards the door, pausing only to look back at the shattered remains of my once happy family. I hope it was worth it, I spat, before turning on my heel and walking away, leaving Nolan to face the fallout of his betrayal head-on. The days following the family gathering were a whirlwind of activity. Nolan's betrayal had been laid bare for all to see, and the consequences were swift and merciless. I wasted no time in filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity as the grounds. My lawyer, ever the shark, ensured that the proceedings moved swiftly, leaving Nolan little room to maneuver. He's finished, she assured me, a predatory gleam in her eye. We're going to take him for everything he's worth, and take him we did. With the evidence of his affair and financial misdeeds, I was able to secure a favorable settlement, full custody of Theo, the house, and a sizable portion of our assets. Nolan, for his part, seemed resigned to his fate. The once confident man was reduced to a shell of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a haunted, hollow look. Brielle, please, he begged during one of our meetings with the lawyers. Can't we try to work things out for Theo's sake? I fixed him with a cold, steely gaze. You should have thought about Theo before you decided to betray us. This is the bed you made, Nolan. Now lie in it. My words seemed to strike him like a physical blow, and he slumped back in his chair, defeated. But the true coup de grace was yet to come. With the divorce proceedings underway, I turned my attention to Nolan's professional life. Armed with the evidence of his misuse of company resources, I reached out to his firm's HR department, ensuring that the appropriate parties were made aware of his transgressions. Within days, the hammer dropped. Nolan was summoned to a meeting with his superiors, where he was confronted with the damning evidence of his affair and the financial trail leading back to the company. According to a friend who worked there, the confrontation was brutal, with Nolan's once respected reputation lying in tatters. In the end, he was given an ultimatum: resign immediately or face termination and potential legal action. Nolan, his pride in shreds, had no choice but to tender his resignation. The news spread like wildfire through our social circles and professional networks. Whispers and sidelong glances followed Nolan wherever he went, his name tainted by the scandal of his own making. As for Cora, the woman at the center of the storm, she too faced consequences. Her involvement with a married man and the misuse of company resources that entailed cost her own job and reputation. In the blink of an eye, the lives they had so carelessly betrayed me to build together came crashing down around them. And through it all, I remained steadfast, ensuring that Nolan's transgressions were laid bare for all to see. He had made his choices, and now he would pay the price, in full and with interest. It was a harsh lesson, but one that he had brought upon himself. And as I watched him grapple with the fallout, a part of me felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. The dust had finally settled, and the divorce was finalized. As I stood in the courtroom, listening to the judge's ruling, a sense of relief washed over me. The nightmare was over, and I had emerged victorious. Full custody of Theo, the house, and a substantial portion of our assets. It was more than I could have hoped for. Nolan, on the other hand, was left with little more than the tattered remnants of his once promising career and a mountain of debt. As we exited the courthouse, Elise was waiting for me, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, Bree," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "That bastard got exactly what he deserved." I nodded, my throat tightening with emotion. "It's over, finally." In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. With Nolan's financial support, I was able to quit my job and take some much-needed time off, allowing me to be there for Theo in a way I hadn't been able to before. My son, bless his heart, seemed to be handling the upheaval remarkably well. He was too young to fully grasp the complexities of what had transpired, but he knew that his father's absence was a result of his own actions. "Daddy made some bad choices," he said to me one day, his brow furrowed in childlike contemplation. "But you're here for me, Mom. That's what matters." Those words, spoken with such innocent wisdom, filled me with a sense of pride and determination. I had fought tooth and nail to protect my family, to ensure that Nolan's betrayal didn't rob Theo of the stability and love he deserved. And now, as I looked towards the future, I saw a world of possibilities opening up before us. With the financial settlement and the weight of Nolan's betrayal lifted from my shoulders, I felt a newfound sense of freedom, a liberation from the shackles of my past. No longer was I the dutiful wife, blindly trusting and turning a blind eye to the harsh realities around me. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had stared down adversity and emerged stronger for it. In the months that followed, I secured a new job, one that allowed me the flexibility to be present for Theo while still pursuing my own ambitions. It was a fresh start, a clean slate, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. As for Nolan, his life had crumbled around him, the consequences of his actions too severe to brush aside. From what I heard through the grapevine, he had been forced to take a menial job, his once promising career in ruins. Cora, too, had disappeared from the picture, her own reputation tarnished by the scandal. A part of me felt a twinge of pity for them, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of vindication. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the fallout. As I looked back on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this point, I realized that I had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The naive, trusting woman I had once been was gone, replaced by a fierce, self-assured version of myself. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, a role model for my son and a testament to the power of perseverance in the face of adversity. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, armed with the strength and resilience that had carried me through my darkest days. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was in control of my own destiny, and nothing would ever shake that foundation again.